What if the world did not change, but your way of looking at it did? What if everything you fear, chase, remember and believe is quietly shaped by one invisible habit of the mind? And tonight, if you notice it even once, you may never see anything the same way again. Before you sleep, let your thoughts slow down, not disappear, not become silent by force. Just slow down enough for you to notice something strange. Most of your life does not happen in the world itself. It happens in the way your mind explains the world to you. A room is not only a room. It becomes safe, lonely, familiar, haunted, peaceful or heavy, depending on the story your mind places over it. A memory is not only a memory. It becomes pain or wisdom, depending on how you return to it. And maybe the deepest truth is not hidden far away in the universe. Maybe it is hidden in the simple act of seeing. Tonight, we are not going to escape reality. We are going to look at it differently, slowly, quietly, as if every thought is a doorway, as if every doorway opens inward, the window that changes the world. There is a strange kind of window inside you. You have looked through it your entire life, but almost never looked at it. You have used it to see people, places, memories, fears, dreams, failures and hopes. Every morning when your eyes open, this window opens too, and through it the world appears. But here is the paradox. You believe you are seeing the world as it is, yet most of the time you are seeing the world as you are. The room is the same room, but on one day it feels peaceful, and on another day it feels unbearable. The sky is the same sky, but when your heart is light, it seems endless and beautiful. When your mind is tired, it feels empty and distant. A message from someone can feel warm if you feel secure, or cold if you are already afraid of being forgotten. So what changed? Did the world change, or did the window? This is where the mind becomes quietly unsettling, because we live as if reality enters us cleanly, like light through clear glass. But the glass is never perfectly clear. It is touched by memory. It is stained by fear. It is warmed by love. It is cracked by old pain. Every experience passes through this invisible glass before it becomes your life. And because the window is always there, you forget it exists. A child afraid of the dark does not fear darkness itself. The darkness is only darkness. What the child fears is what the mind paints inside it. A lonely adult looking at an empty chair does not only see furniture, they see absence. They see someone who should be there. They see a life that could have gone differently. The object is simple, the meaning is not, and meaning is where reality becomes personal. Ask yourself this gently. Have you ever returned to a place that once hurt you, only to find it strangely harmless years later? The walls were the same, the streets were the same, maybe even the smell of the air was the same. But something inside you had moved, the window had changed. The world did not apologize, the past did not rewrite itself, yet the pain loosened because the one looking had become different. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Reality may be what exists outside you, but your experience of reality is shaped inside you. That does not mean the world is fake. It does not mean pain is imaginary. It means you are never just receiving life, you are participating in it. Your mind is not a passive mirror. It is an artist, a translator, a storyteller. It takes raw moments and gives them color. It takes silence and turns it into peace or rejection. It takes uncertainty and turns it into possibility or dread. And this is why two people can live through the same event and carry two different worlds away from it. One sees an ending, one sees a beginning. One sees failure. One sees instruction. One sees abandonment. One sees freedom. The event may be shared, but the window is private. And perhaps this is why changing your life sometimes begins before anything outside you changes. It begins when you notice the glass. When you realize, I am not only seeing this moment, I am interpreting it. That small realization creates a space, and inside that space, you are no longer trapped inside the first meaning your mind gives you. A thought may say, "This is hopeless." But then awareness whispers, "That is one way of seeing." A fear may say, "Nothing will ever change." But awareness whispers, "That is the old window speaking." A memory may say, "You are still who you were." But awareness whispers, "No, you are the one looking back now." And slowly the spell weakens. Not all at once, not dramatically, just quietly, like fog thinning from the glass. This is why the mind can be both a prison and a doorway. If you never notice the window, you believe every shadow is part of the world. But once you notice it, even slightly, everything becomes softer. You begin to ask not only what is happening, but also how am I seeing what is happening? That question changes everything. Because the moment you ask it, you are no longer fully inside the dream of your own interpretation. You have stepped back. You have become the watcher of the window, and the watcher is freer than the one who only reacts. Tonight, as you rest, imagine your mind as a quiet pane of glass. Thoughts pass across it. Old fears leave fingerprints. Memories breathe against it like mist. But beneath all of that, something clear remains. You do not have to break the window, you only have to notice it. And once you notice it, the world may still be the world, but it will never look exactly the same again. The thought that feels like reality. There is a moment, so small you rarely notice it. A thought appears, and before you even realize it, it feels true. Not because you examined it, not because you proved it, but because it arrived with a certain feeling attached to it. And that feeling quietly convinces you. This is the paradox. Thoughts are not reality. Yet some thoughts feel so real that they become your reality. Consider this gently. Have you ever imagined something going wrong, and suddenly your body reacted as if it already had? Your chest tightened, your breathing changed, your mood shifted. Nothing had actually happened. So why did it feel real? Because the mind does not only create thoughts, it creates sensations to support them. A thought says, something is wrong. The body answers with tension. The emotion follows with unease. And now, the thought is no longer just a thought. It feels like truth. This is how the illusion strengthens itself. You do not believe a thought because it is logical. You believe it because it feels convincing. And feelings are powerful storytellers. Imagine sitting alone in a quiet room. A simple thought appears. What if something is not right? Immediately, your awareness narrows. You start noticing small sounds. Shadows feel deeper. Silence feels heavier. Nothing in the room changed, but your experience of the room did. So again, ask yourself slowly, did reality change? Or did the thought change how reality feels? The answer is subtle, but important. Reality remained what it was, but your mind painted over it so completely, it became difficult to separate the two. This is how thoughts quietly shape your world. A thought about the future can make you anxious. A thought about the past can make you regretful. A thought about yourself can make you feel small, or worthy, or invisible. And yet, all of them share the same nature. They are temporary. They appear, and they pass. But here is where the paradox deepens. If thoughts are temporary, why do they sometimes feel permanent? Why does one idea linger, echo, repeat, until it feels like part of who you are? The answer is not because the thought is stronger, it is because attention is feeding it. A thought that is noticed lightly fades. A thought that is examined intensely grows. A thought that is resisted returns. And a thought that is believed settles in. Not because it was real to begin with, but because it was treated as if it were. Think of it like a quiet voice in a large empty hall. If you hear it once and let it pass, it disappears. But if you turn toward it, question it, argue with it, fear it, the echo begins. And soon it sounds louder than it ever was. This is why some thoughts feel like reality, not because they are true, but because they are repeated. And repetition creates familiarity, and familiarity creates belief, and belief creates experience. So slowly, gently, without forcing anything, consider this question. If a thought can feel real without being real, then how many of the things you believe about yourself are simply thoughts that stayed too long? The answer is not meant to disturb you, it is meant to free you. Because the moment you see this clearly, something shifts. You begin to notice the space between you and your thoughts. A thought says, "You are not enough," and for a moment you almost believe it. But then something quieter appears, not another thought, something deeper. It simply observes. It does not argue. It does not react. It just sees. That is a thought, and suddenly the weight changes. The thought may still be there, but it no longer defines the entire moment. This is the beginning of freedom. Not removing thoughts, not controlling them, but recognizing their nature. You are not the voice that speaks. You are the one who hears it. And once you see that, even briefly, thoughts lose their ability to fully become reality. They become what they always were, passing shapes in the mind, like clouds, some dark, some light, some heavy, some almost invisible, but none of them permanent, and none of them you. So tonight, as your mind continues to move, do not try to stop it. Let the thoughts come, let them speak. Let them create their small illusions. But from somewhere quiet inside you, just notice. This feels real, but it is still only a thought. And in that noticing, something loosens, something softens, something opens, and slowly the difference between what is real and what only feels real becomes clear. The memory that rewrites itself. There is something you trust without question, something you return to again and again, something that feels like proof of who you are, what you lived, what truly happened, your memory. It feels solid, it feels fixed, it feels like a record of reality. But here is the quiet, unsettling paradox. Your memory does not only remember the past, it rewrites it. And it does this so gently, you never notice the change. Think about a moment from your life, not a major one, just something small, a conversation, a place, a day that once mattered. Now ask yourself, slowly, are you remembering what actually happened, or are you remembering the last time you remembered it? Because each time you revisit a memory, something subtle occurs. You don't just open it, you edit it. A detail becomes clearer, another fades. A feeling becomes stronger, a meaning shifts slightly. And then, when you close it again, you don't store the original, you store the edited version. This is how memory changes without ever announcing that it has changed. And over time, the past becomes something else entirely. Not false, but not untouched either. Imagine this. Two people live through the same moment. Years later, they tell the story. One remembers warmth, the other remembers distance. One recalls laughter, the other recalls silence. So what is the truth? Did the moment contain both? Or did each mind reshape it in its own image? This is where the paradox deepens. Memory feels like truth, but it behaves like imagination. It blends what happened with how it felt and then quietly rearranges both. A painful memory can soften over time, not because the event changed, but because your mind changed how it holds it. A happy memory can become bittersweet, not because it was always that way, but because your present emotions have reached back and touched it. So again, gently ask yourself, if your memory can change, then how certain can you be about the past you carry? The answer is not meant to create doubt in everything. It is meant to show something deeper. You are not trapped in a fixed past, because the past you experience is always passing through the present version of you. This is why healing is possible, not because you erase what happened, but because you change how it lives inside you. A memory once filled with pain can slowly lose its sharpness, not by force, not by denial, but by understanding, by seeing it from a wider perspective, by allowing new meanings to enter. And over time, the memory becomes lighter, not gone, just different. But there is another side to this paradox. If memory can soften pain, it can also strengthen it. A moment of rejection can grow larger each time you revisit it. A mistake can feel heavier with every repetition. A fear can become more real simply because you return to it again and again, not because it was that big, but because it was repeated that many times. This is how the mind builds identity from memory. You remember moments, then you attach meaning, then you repeat the meaning, and slowly it becomes a belief. I always fail. I am not enough. I was never understood. These do not begin as truths. They begin as interpretations of memories, and those interpretations get reinforced each time the memory is revisited. So the question becomes deeper now. Are you living based on what truly happened, or based on how your memory has reshaped it over time? The answer is not simple, but it reveals something important. Your past is not a fixed place behind you. It is something that lives inside you and continues to move, and if it continues to move, then it can continue to change. Not by rewriting facts, but by rewriting meaning. And meaning is where experience lives. Imagine holding a memory in your hands, not as a story, not as a judgment, but as a simple moment that once existed, without adding anything, without removing anything, just seeing it as it was. For a brief moment, there is clarity, no weight, no identity attached to it, just a moment, and then slowly the mind returns. It adds interpretation, it adds emotion, it shapes it again. But now, something inside you knows. This is not the only way to see it, and that knowing changes everything. Because the moment you realize that memory is not perfectly reliable, you stop treating it as absolute truth. You begin to question it gently. You begin to soften your attachment to its meanings, and in that space, something new becomes possible. You are no longer fully defined by what you remember. You become someone who can see memory without being trapped inside it. So tonight, as old moments rise in your mind, do not push them away. Do not hold them tightly either. Just notice them. Notice how they feel. Notice how they shift. Notice how each time they appear, they are slightly different, and quietly remind yourself, this is not the past itself. This is my mind remembering it. And in that simple awareness, the past loosens its grip. Not completely, not instantly, but enough. Enough for you to breathe differently. Enough for you to feel a little lighter. Enough to see that even your memories are not as fixed as they once seemed. And if even the past can move, then perhaps you are not as stuck as you once believed. The emotion that pretends to be truth. There is a quiet moment that happens inside you almost every day. An emotion rises, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to color everything. And before you even notice it, something deeper happens. You begin to believe it, not as a feeling, but as truth. This is the paradox. Emotions are temporary, yet they often feel like permanent reality. A wave passes through you, and suddenly the world seems to agree with it. If you feel anxious, the future appears uncertain. If you feel sad, everything seems heavy. If you feel insecure, people seem distant. But pause for a moment and ask yourself slowly, did the world actually change, or did the emotion change how the world appears? The answer is subtle but powerful. The world remained as it was, but your experience of it shifted completely. This is how emotions quietly pretend to be truth. They do not announce themselves as temporary visitors. They arrive with a sense of authority. A sadness does not say, "I am here for a while." It whispers, "This is how things are." Anxiety does not say, "This is just a passing reaction." It whispers, "Something is wrong." And because the feeling is strong, you trust it, not because it is accurate, but because it is convincing. Imagine this. You wake up one morning with a strange heaviness. Nothing specific has happened, no clear reason, but the feeling is there. And slowly, your mind begins searching. It looks for explanations, it connects small details, it builds a story. Maybe something is off, maybe something is missing, maybe this day will not go well. And now, the emotion has found its voice. Not because it was true, but because the mind gave it meaning. This is how the loop forms. Emotion creates a feeling. The mind creates a story. The story strengthens the emotion, and soon it feels like reality itself. But here is where the paradox begins to soften. If emotions can shape your perception of reality, then can you trust every emotional conclusion you reach? The answer, gently, is no. Not because emotions are wrong, but because they are incomplete. They are signals, not final truths. They are movements, not destinations. A feeling of fear may be useful, it may protect you. But it does not always mean danger is present. A feeling of sadness may be meaningful, it may ask for attention, but it does not always mean something is truly lost. A feeling of emptiness may appear, but it does not always mean something is missing. And yet, when you are inside the emotion, it feels absolute. This is the illusion, not that emotions exist, but that they define reality. Think of emotions like weather passing through the sky. Some days are clear, some days are heavy with clouds. Some moments feel like storms, but the sky itself remains. The sky does not become the storm, it allows it. And in the same way, you are not the emotion, you are the space in which the emotion appears. But when you forget this, the emotion takes over. A moment of fear becomes, "I am afraid of everything." A moment of sadness becomes, "My life is sad." A moment of doubt becomes, "I am not enough." And suddenly, a temporary state becomes a permanent identity. So ask yourself this gently. If an emotion can convince you so deeply, how often have you mistaken a passing feeling for a lasting truth? The answer may not come immediately, but you can begin to notice it. The next time an emotion rises, do not push it away. Do not try to control it. Just observe it. Feel it without naming it as truth. Let it move without building a story around it. And something subtle will happen. The emotion will still be there, but its grip will loosen. Not because it disappeared, but because you are no longer believing everything it says. This is the beginning of clarity, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of awareness. You begin to see the difference between what I feel and what is real. And that difference creates space. Space to breathe, space to choose, space to respond instead of react. The feeling may say, everything is falling apart, but awareness quietly replies, this is a feeling, not a conclusion. A wave may rise, but you are no longer drowning in it. You are watching it move, and in that watching, something inside you becomes steady. So tonight, as emotions pass through you, welcome them gently, not as truths, but as visitors. Let them speak, but do not let them define everything, and quietly remind yourself, this feels real, but it is not the whole truth. Because when you see emotions for what they are, they lose their power to become your reality, and slowly, very quietly, you begin to see the world without their distortion, not cold, not empty, but clear. And in that clarity, something deeper than emotion begins to appear, something still, something steady, something real. The fear that creates what it fears. There is a quiet pattern that moves through the mind, so subtle you rarely notice when it begins. A small fear appears, not overwhelming, not loud, just a gentle thought that says, what if? And in that moment, something shifts. Your attention narrows, your body becomes alert, your mind begins to prepare. And without realizing it, you start moving in a way that makes the fear feel more real. This is the paradox. Fear is meant to protect you, yet sometimes it quietly creates the very thing it is trying to avoid. Imagine walking into a room where people are speaking softly. A thought appears. What if they don't like me? It feels small at first, but then your posture changes. Your voice becomes uncertain. Your words become careful, slightly withdrawn. You hesitate. You hold back. You speak less than you normally would, and slowly the interaction becomes distant. Not because they rejected you, but because fear changed how you showed up. And then, when the moment ends, the mind whispers, see, something felt off. But what actually happened? Did the world reject you, or did fear shape the experience into something that felt like rejection? This is how fear creates what it fears, not always in obvious ways, but in small, repeated patterns. The fear of failure makes you hesitate. Hesitation reduces your effort. Reduced effort leads to weaker results. And then the mind concludes, I knew I would fail. But the failure was not inevitable. It was influenced. A fear of being misunderstood makes you speak less openly. You hide parts of yourself. You simplify your thoughts. And then others don't fully understand you, not because they couldn't, but because fear limited what you shared. A fear of loss makes you hold on too tightly. You become controlling, careful, guarded, and in that tension, something begins to fade. Not because it was meant to leave, but because it was not given space to breathe. So again, gently ask yourself, how often has fear shaped your actions and then convinced you that the outcome was proof? The answer is not meant to blame you, it is meant to reveal something deeper. Fear does not only exist in your mind, it quietly influences how you move through the world, It changes your tone, your timing, your choices, and those changes shape your reality. This is why fear can feel so accurate, not because it predicts the future, but because it participates in creating it. But here is where the paradox begins to loosen. If fear can shape outcomes, then awareness can change that pattern. Not by removing fear completely, but by seeing it before it takes control. Imagine the same moment again. You walk into the room. The same thought appears. What if they don't like me? But this time, something is different. You notice it, not after it takes over, but as it arrives. And in that noticing, a small space appears, a gap between the thought and your response. Inside that gap, something quiet speaks. This is fear, not truth, not certainty, just fear. And suddenly, you are no longer fully inside it. The thought is still there, the feeling is still there, but it no longer controls your next move completely. You breathe a little more naturally, you speak a little more freely, you allow yourself to be present instead of protected, and something changes, not because the world became kinder, but because fear no longer shaped every action. And in that shift, a different outcome becomes possible. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Fear does not always come true, but when it is unconscious, it can quietly guide you toward the very thing you fear. And when it is seen, it begins to lose that power. Not instantly, not completely, but enough to change direction, enough to interrupt the pattern, enough to remind you that fear is not a prophecy, it is a signal, a movement of the mind trying to protect you. But protection does not always require retreat. Sometimes it requires awareness. So tonight, when a fear appears, do not push it away, do not fight it, just notice it. Notice how it tries to guide your actions. Notice how it changes your body, your thoughts, your choices, and gently ask yourself, is this fear describing reality, or is it shaping it? That question creates space, and in that space, you are no longer being led blindly. You are choosing, even if only slightly, even if only for a moment. And those small moments begin to add up. The pattern weakens, the loop softens, the fear loses its quiet authority, and slowly, very slowly, you begin to move through the world, not as someone avoiding what they fear, but as someone who sees fear, without becoming it. The control that removes control. There is something the mind reaches for, almost instinctively. Control. Not always in obvious ways, not always through force, but in small, quiet attempts to shape everything just right. To think the right thoughts, to feel the right feelings, to avoid the wrong outcomes, to hold life steady so nothing unpredictable slips through. And at first, it feels reasonable, even necessary, because control gives a sense of safety. If you can manage everything, then nothing can hurt you. If you can predict everything, then nothing can surprise you. If you can hold everything in place, then nothing can fall apart. But here is the paradox. The more you try to control everything, the less in control you begin to feel. It happens slowly. So slowly, you might not notice where it begins. You try to control your thoughts, but they multiply. You try to control your emotions, but they become heavier. You try to control outcomes, but uncertainty grows louder. And suddenly, what once felt like strength begins to feel like tension. Imagine trying to relax your body by forcing it. You tighten your muscles, trying to release tension. You think harder, trying to quiet the mind. But the more effort you apply, the more resistance appears. Because some things cannot be controlled into calmness, they can only be allowed. This is where control becomes its own contradiction. The act of trying to control everything creates the very discomfort you are trying to escape. A person tries to control their anxiety. They monitor every thought. They question every feeling. They try to remove anything uncertain. And yet, the anxiety grows. Not because something is wrong, but because control itself is feeding the tension. A person tries to control how others see them. They adjust their words. They filter their personality. They carefully shape every interaction, and slowly they lose something. Not others, but themselves. Because in trying to control perception, they stop expressing what is real, and then they feel disconnected. Not because they were rejected, but because they were never fully seen. So again, gently ask yourself, how much of your tension comes not from what is happening, but from trying to control what is happening? The answer is not always comfortable, but it reveals something freeing. Control is not the same as stability, and sometimes letting go creates more balance than holding on ever could. But this does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean giving up. It means understanding the difference between what can be guided and what must be allowed. You can guide your actions. You can choose your direction. You can respond with intention. But you cannot control every outcome. You cannot control every thought that appears. You cannot control every emotion that moves through you. You cannot control how others think or feel. And when you try, you begin to feel smaller inside your own life, like someone constantly adjusting something that will never stay still. This is where the shift begins, not in doing less, but in holding less. Imagine sitting quietly and allowing your thoughts to come and go, not stopping them, not correcting them, not following them, just allowing. At first it feels unfamiliar, maybe even uncomfortable, because the mind is used to doing something, fixing, analyzing, controlling. But slowly, something changes. The thoughts still move, the emotions still rise, but the tension softens. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer resisting everything imperfect. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Control feels like power, but awareness is deeper power. Because awareness does not fight reality. It sees it clearly and chooses how to move within it. When you stop trying to control every thought, you realize you don't need to. When you stop trying to control every feeling, you realize they pass on their own. When you stop trying to control every outcome, you become more present in the moment itself. And presence has a quiet strength. It allows you to respond instead of react. It allows you to act without being consumed by the result. It allows life to move without feeling like it is slipping away from you. So tonight, gently notice this. Where are you holding too tightly? Where are you trying to control something that keeps resisting your control? And what would happen if just for a moment you softened that grip? Not completely, just slightly, just enough to feel the difference. Because sometimes the peace you are searching for is not found by controlling more, but by releasing what was never yours to control. And in that release, something unexpected appears. Not chaos, not loss, but a quiet kind of balance. A sense that life is still moving and you are still here within it. Not as someone forcing everything to stay still, but as someone who can finally move with it. The identity that never stays the same. There is a question that follows you quietly through life. Not always spoken, but always present. Who am I? And without thinking too deeply, you answer it. You say your name, your past, your personality, your likes and dislikes, your strengths, your weaknesses. And for a moment, it feels clear, it feels stable, it feels like something solid you can hold. But here is the paradox. The you believe you are is always changing, yet it feels like it stays the same. Think about this gently. The person you were 5 years ago is not the person you are today. Your thoughts have changed, your beliefs have shifted, your reactions have softened or hardened, your priorities have moved. Even your memories, as you saw before, have been reshaped, and still you feel like the same person. How is that possible? What is it that stays the same when everything about you continues to change? This is where identity becomes quietly mysterious. Because identity is not a fixed object. It is a story constantly being updated. Each experience adds a new sentence. Each memory rewrites an old one. Each emotion leaves a subtle mark. And slowly, without noticing, you build a sense of self. I am this kind of person. I always do this. I am not someone who does that. These feel like truths, but look closely. They are patterns, remembered and repeated, not permanent definitions. A person who once believed, I am shy, may one day speak freely without fear. A person who believed, I always fail, may one day succeed in ways they never expected. A person who thought, this is who I am, may quietly outgrow that version of themselves. So again, ask yourself slowly, if your identity can change, then what exactly are you holding on to when you say, this is me? The answer is subtle. You are holding on to a version of yourself that once felt true, and because it felt true, you continue to carry it forward, even when it no longer fits. This is how identity becomes both comfort and limitation. It gives you a sense of continuity, but it can also quietly keep you the same. A person says, I am not confident, and so they act in ways that match that belief. They hold back, they hesitate. They avoid certain situations, not because they cannot be confident, but because they are protecting the identity they believe is real. This is how identity shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity, and the loop continues. But here is where the paradox begins to soften. If identity is not fixed, then you are not limited to who you think you are. You are not bound to a single version of yourself. You are not required to stay the same. But this realization can feel unsettling, because if you are not the identity you hold, then what are you? The answer is not another label, not another definition. It is something quieter. You are the one who experiences the change, the one who notices thoughts shifting, the one who watches emotions rise and fall, the one who sees memories appear and fade. Identity changes, but awareness remains. You have been a child, a different version of yourself, someone with different beliefs, different fears, different desires. All of those versions existed, and yet you are here now, aware of all of them. So what is constant? Not the personality, not the thoughts, not the roles you play, but the awareness that has been present through all of it. This is the deeper layer of who you are, not something you become, something you already are. But the mind prefers identity, because identity feels safe, it feels known, it feels predictable. Letting go of a fixed identity can feel like losing something. But in truth, you are not losing yourself. You are loosening the boundaries around yourself. You are allowing space for change, for growth, for movement, for becoming something new without needing to force it. Imagine not needing to define yourself so tightly, not needing to say, I am always this, or "I can never be that." Imagine allowing yourself to respond to life as it comes, instead of filtering everything through an old identity. There is a kind of freedom in that, a quiet openness, where you are no longer acting from who you think you are, but from what the moment asks of you. And in that space, something more natural appears. You speak more honestly, you act more freely, you change without resistance, because you are no longer protecting a fixed version of yourself. You are simply living. So tonight, gently notice this. When you say, "This is just who I am," pause for a moment. Ask yourself, is this truly who I am, or is this a version of me that I have repeated for so long it feels permanent? That question creates space, and in that space, identity begins to loosen, not disappear, but soften. And in that softness, you begin to see something deeper. You are not the fixed image you hold in your mind. You are the one watching it change. And once you see that, you are no longer limited to being only one thing. You become something quieter, something open, something that can change without ever being lost. The meaning you secretly add to everything. There is something you do constantly, so naturally, that it feels invisible. You add meaning, not loudly, not intentionally, but quietly, beneath every experience. A look from someone becomes approval or rejection. A delay becomes disrespect or indifference. A silence becomes peace or loneliness. And the moment meaning is added, the experience changes. This is the paradox. Nothing has meaning on its own, yet everything feels meaningful to you. Consider this gently. A message arrives, but it is short. Just a few words, no tone, no expression, no explanation. And yet, your mind does not leave it empty. It fills the space. Why was it so short? Did I do something wrong? Are they upset? Or maybe they must be busy. They trust me enough to be simple. They feel comfortable. The same message, but entirely different experiences. So what changed? Did the message change, or did the meaning change? The answer is quiet but powerful. The message remained the same, but your mind created a story around it, and that story became your reality. This is how meaning works. It is not found, it is added. A room is just a room until it becomes home or empty. A memory is just a moment until it becomes regret or lesson. A person is just a person until they become important or forgettable. Meaning turns neutral moments into emotional experiences, and because meaning feels so real, you rarely question it. You assume it was always there, but pause for a moment. Before you gave something meaning, what was it? Just a moment, just a situation, just a simple occurrence. Meaning is what gives it weight, and weight is what shapes your experience. This is why two people can see the same event and walk away with completely different worlds inside them. One sees failure, one sees growth, one sees rejection, one sees redirection, one sees loss, one sees space. The event does not change, the meaning does, and meaning is created quietly inside the mind. So again, gently ask yourself, how much of what you feel comes not from what happened, but from what you made it mean? The answer is not always easy, but it reveals something important. You are not only living through events, you are interpreting them constantly, and those interpretations shape your reality. A small misunderstanding can feel like a deep rejection if the meaning becomes personal. A simple mistake can feel like failure if the meaning becomes identity. A moment of silence can feel heavy if the meaning becomes absence. But what if the meaning was different? What if the same moment could be seen another way? Not falsely, not by forcing positivity, but by recognizing that meaning is not fixed. It is flexible. It is shaped by perspective. This is where the paradox begins to soften. If meaning is something you add, then you are not completely controlled by it. You can question it, not aggressively, not by rejecting your feelings, but by gently asking, is this the only meaning this moment can have? That question creates space. And in that space, something opens. The mind begins to loosen its grip on the first interpretation. It begins to see alternatives, not to deny the original meaning, but to expand beyond it. A delay is no longer only disrespect. It could be distraction, or timing, or something you cannot see. A silence is no longer only loneliness. It could be rest, or peace, or space to breathe. A challenge is no longer only difficulty. It could be movement, or growth, or something unfolding. And suddenly, the experience changes. Not because the world changed, but because the meaning shifted. This does not mean everything must be positive. It means everything is not limited to one interpretation. Meaning is not a single answer. It is a range of possibilities, and you often choose one without noticing. But once you see this clearly, you begin to move differently. You stop immediately believing the first meaning your mind creates. You begin to observe it. This is what my mind is making this mean. And in that awareness, something softens. The moment becomes lighter, not empty, but less fixed, more open, more fluid, more real, in a quieter way. Because you are no longer trapped inside one story. You are seeing the process of meaning itself, and when you see the process, you are no longer completely inside it. So tonight, as moments pass through your mind, notice how quickly meaning appears. Notice how naturally the mind fills empty spaces, and gently remind yourself, this is the meaning I am adding, not the meaning that must exist. And in that simple noticing, something shifts. The world does not become meaningless, it becomes flexible. Less rigid, less heavy, more open to understanding. And in that openness, you begin to see things as they are, before the meaning is added, before the story begins, before the mind quietly turns everything into something personal. The loop that keeps you trapped. There is a loop that lives quietly inside the mind. It does not begin loudly. It does not announce itself. It simply starts and then continues. A thought appears. You react to it. That reaction creates another thought, and before you realize it, you are moving in circles. This is the paradox. The more you try to escape certain thoughts, the more you return to them. And the more you return to them, the more real they begin to feel. Imagine this. A thought enters your mind. I need to stop thinking about this. At first, it seems like control, like you are taking charge of your own mind. But something subtle happens. By trying to stop the thought, you are giving it attention. And attention keeps it alive. So the thought returns. Stronger this time, and again you try to push it away, and again it comes back. Not because it is powerful, but because it is being fed. This is how the loop forms. Thought, reaction, thought, reaction. And each time it repeats, it feels harder to break. A worry becomes a pattern, a fear becomes a habit. A small idea becomes something that feels permanent, not because it was meant to stay, but because it was repeated. Think about a moment when your mind would not rest. A single thought kept returning. You tried to distract yourself, you tried to replace it, you tried to argue with it. But the more effort you used, the more it remained. So ask yourself slowly, if trying to stop the loop keeps it going, then what actually ends it? The answer is quieter than you expect. The loop does not end by force, it ends by awareness, because the loop depends on reaction, not the thought itself, but your response to it. When a thought appears, and you immediately follow it, the loop continues. But when a thought appears, and you simply notice it, something changes. There is no fuel, no reaction, no continuation, and for a brief moment, the loop pauses. This is where freedom begins, not in controlling the mind, but in seeing the movement of the mind. Imagine sitting quietly, watching your thoughts like distant echoes. A thought arises, you see it, but you do not follow it, you do not resist it, you do not build a story around it, and slowly it fades, not because you removed it, but because you did not continue it. And in that space, there is stillness, not forced stillness, not empty silence, but a natural pause, a break in the pattern, and for the first time, you realize something important. You are not trapped in the loop. You are the one noticing the loop, and the one who notices is not inside the cycle. But there is another layer to this paradox. Sometimes the loop is not uncomfortable. Sometimes it is familiar, and familiarity can feel safe. You return to the same thoughts, the same worries, the same patterns, not because you want to suffer, but because it feels known. Even if it is heavy, it is predictable, and the unknown feels uncertain. So the mind returns to the loop again and again. But once you see it clearly, something shifts. The loop is no longer invisible. You begin to notice its beginning, its repetition, its rhythm. And in that noticing, you are no longer fully inside it. You are observing it, and observation weakens repetition. Because you are no longer reacting automatically, you are choosing, even if only slightly. So tonight, when a thought returns again, pause for a moment. Do not fight it. Do not follow it. Just see it. See how it tries to continue. See how it invites your reaction, and gently remain still, even for a few seconds, because sometimes a few seconds of awareness is enough to interrupt a pattern that has lasted for years. And in that interruption, something quiet opens, a space you were not noticing before, a stillness beneath the movement, a freedom beneath the repetition. And if you stay with that even briefly, you begin to understand. The loop was never the prison, unawareness was, and awareness is the door that was always open. And if this moment, this quiet shift in seeing, is resonating with you, if you feel even a small sense of space opening inside your mind, then perhaps this journey is already changing something within you. And if it is, take a second, gently, without breaking this calm, to support this space we are creating together. A simple like, a quiet subscription, helps this kind of work reach others who may be caught in the same unseen loops. Only if it feels right to you. Now, return your attention inward, because the loop may still appear, but now you are no longer lost inside it. The observer that changes what is observed. There is something happening right now, so subtle, so constant, that it almost disappears. You are observing. You are noticing these words. You are aware of the space around you. You are aware of thoughts moving quietly in the background. And it feels simple. It feels passive, as if you are just watching what is already there. But here is the paradox. The moment you observe something, you begin to change it. Not by force, not intentionally, but simply by the act of noticing. Imagine this. You are sitting quietly and your mind is wandering. Thoughts move freely, without interruption. But the moment you notice one thought, it shifts, it slows down, it becomes clearer, it almost feels exposed, as if the act of seeing it has altered its nature. Before observation, it was automatic. After observation, it becomes something you can see, something you can question, something you are no longer fully inside. So ask yourself slowly, if observing a thought changes it, then what happens when you observe your entire experience? This is where the paradox deepens. Observation is not neutral, it is transformative. A feeling of anxiety, when unnoticed, can grow. It spreads quietly through the body, it tightens the chest, it narrows your attention. But the moment you notice it, I feel anxious, something shifts. The feeling is still there, but now there is space around it. It is no longer everything. It is something within awareness, and that difference changes how it feels. It becomes lighter, less overwhelming, not because it disappeared, but because it is no longer hidden. This is how observation changes experience, not by removing it, but by revealing it. A hidden pattern becomes visible, an automatic reaction becomes a choice, a strong emotion becomes something that can be felt without being lost in it, and slowly the power shifts, from the thing being observed to the one observing it. But there is another layer to this paradox. The observer itself feels constant. It feels like you. But if you look closely, what exactly is the observer? Is it a thought? No, because you can observe thoughts. Is it an emotion? No, because emotions rise and fall, and you notice them. Is it your identity? No, because as you saw before, identity changes. So what is it? The observer is not something you can see as an object. It is the space in which everything appears. It does not speak loudly. It does not demand attention. It simply knows. And because it is always present, you rarely notice it. It is like the sky behind the clouds. The clouds move, the sky remains. Thoughts move, feelings move, experiences move, but awareness stays. And here is where everything begins to shift. If you are the observer, then you are not limited to what you observe. You are not your thoughts, you are not your emotions, you are not even the changing identity you carry. You are the one aware of all of it. And awareness has a quiet freedom, because it does not need to control what it sees. It simply sees. And in that seeing, things begin to change on their own. A thought loses its intensity when observed. A fear softens when seen clearly. A pattern weakens when it is no longer hidden. This is why observation is powerful. Not because it forces change, but because it allows change. But again, ask yourself gently, if observing changes what is observed, then what happens when you begin to observe your life more clearly? The answer is subtle. Life does not suddenly become perfect, but it becomes less automatic, less reactive, more open. You begin to notice the space before you respond, the space before you speak, the space before you believe a thought. And in that space, something new becomes possible. Choice, not forced choice, not controlled behavior, but a natural shift. You respond instead of react. You see instead of assume. You feel without becoming lost. And slowly, your experience of life changes, not because the world changed, but because the observer became clear. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice the thoughts moving through your mind. Notice the emotions rising and falling. Notice the quiet awareness behind all of it. Do not try to control anything, just observe, because the moment you observe, you are no longer completely inside what you observe. You are beyond it, and in that quiet distance, something begins to open, a stillness, a clarity, a sense that beneath everything that changes, there is something that does not, something calm, something steady, something aware. And once you begin to see from that place, everything you observe begins to change. The present that disappears when you chase it. There is a moment you are always inside. It is happening now. It has no past. It has no future. It is the only place where life actually unfolds, and yet it is the one place you rarely stay. This is the paradox. The more you try to hold the present, the more it slips away. The more you chase it, the further it feels. Think about this gently. How often have you told yourself, "I need to be more present"? It sounds simple, even peaceful. But the moment you try to force it, something subtle changes. You begin to think about being present. You monitor your thoughts. You check your awareness. You ask yourself, "Am I here right now?" And without realizing it, you have already left. Because the present cannot be reached through thinking about it. It can only be experienced, and thinking always moves slightly away from it. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter your grip, the faster it escapes. But if you relax your hands, it rests naturally. The present works the same way. When you try to control it, you move into effort. When you try to capture it, you move into thought. And in both cases, you are no longer fully inside it. So ask yourself slowly, if chasing the present makes you lose it, then how do you actually stay in it? The answer is quieter than effort. You do not chase the present. You notice when you leave it, because the mind is always moving. It moves to the past, replaying what happened. It moves to the future, imagining what could happen. And both movements feel important. They feel necessary, but they are not the present. They are thoughts about time, and the more you follow them, the further you drift. But the moment you notice this, "I am thinking about the future, I am replaying the past," something shifts. You return, not by force, not by effort, but by awareness. And suddenly, the present is here again, not because you created it, but because you stopped leaving it. This is the first layer of the paradox. The present is not something you reach, it is something you return to, again and again and again. But there is a deeper layer. Even when you are here, the mind still tries to hold it. It says, "Stay like this, don't lose this feeling, this moment is perfect." And again, something changes. Because the moment you try to keep the present, you introduce time. You create a future where this moment continues. And now, you are no longer fully here. You are trying to extend something that was never meant to stay. The present is not stable, it is flowing, it moves. Every second, it changes. And trying to freeze it is another way of leaving it. So again, gently ask yourself, what happens when you stop trying to hold the present and simply allow it to move? The answer is subtle, but freeing. You begin to experience moments more fully, not because you are holding them, but because you are not resisting their change. A quiet moment is felt deeply, without needing it to last. A peaceful feeling is enjoyed without needing to keep it. A simple breath becomes enough without needing to extend it. And in that allowing, the present becomes more alive, not controlled, not fixed, but real. Because reality is always moving. And the present is not a place you stay. It is a movement you experience, like a river. You do not stand inside it forever, you move with it. And the moment you stop trying to control its flow, you feel its depth. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. The present disappears when you chase it, because chasing creates distance. But it appears naturally when you stop moving away. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough to feel something deeper, a stillness beneath movement, a calm within change, a quiet awareness that does not need to hold anything. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice when your mind moves away. Notice when it reaches for the past. Notice when it tries to predict the future. And without judgment, simply return to the breath, to the body, to the simple awareness of this moment. And if you lose it again, return again. Because that is the rhythm of being present, not staying, returning. And slowly, you begin to understand something simple, yet profound. The present was never hiding from you. It was always here. You were just looking somewhere else. And now, even for a moment, you are here. And that is enough. The story that becomes your life. There is a story you have been telling for a very long time. Not always out loud, not always clearly, but quietly beneath your thoughts, your choices, your reactions. A story continues. A story about who you are, about what your life means, about what is possible and what is not. And over time, this story begins to feel real. Not like imagination, not like something created, but like truth. This is the paradox. The story you tell about your life slowly becomes the life you experience. Not because it changes reality itself, but because it shapes how you move within it. Think about this gently. A person carries a story. I am someone who is always overlooked. They do not say it constantly, but it lives quietly in the background, and so they notice moments where they are ignored, more than moments where they are seen. They speak less, they hesitate to express themselves fully, and over time, the experience repeats, not because the world decided it, but because the story guided their perception and their behavior. Another person carries a different story. Every experience teaches me something, and so, even in difficulty, they search for meaning, they look for patterns, they reflect instead of closing, and slowly, their life feels like growth, not because they avoided pain, but because they interpreted it differently. So again, ask yourself slowly, are you living your life, or are you living the story you believe about your life? The answer is subtle, because the story is not separate from you. It feels like you. It feels like your identity. Your past becomes evidence for it. Your thoughts reinforce it. Your memories support it. And slowly, it becomes something you no longer question. But look closely. Where did the story begin? Was it always there, or did it form from a few moments repeated over time? A childhood experience becomes a belief. A repeated outcome becomes a pattern. A strong emotion becomes a conclusion, and then the mind connects it all together. This is who I am. This is how life works. But the story is not complete truth. It is a collection of interpretations, selected moments arranged into meaning, and meaning, as you saw before, is something the mind creates. This is why two people can live completely different lives, even in similar circumstances, because they are not only living events, they are living stories. And stories guide perception, they guide attention, they guide action, and action shapes experience. This is how the loop forms. Story, perception, behavior, experience, story. and each time it repeats, the story feels more real. But here is where the paradox begins to soften. If your life is shaped by the story you tell, then the story is not fixed. It can change. Not by pretending, not by forcing a new belief, but by seeing the story clearly. Because the moment you see a story as a story, you are no longer completely inside it. You begin to notice it. This is the story I am telling. And in that awareness, space appears. The story may still be there, but it is no longer invisible. It is no longer unquestioned, and that changes everything. Imagine holding your story gently instead of tightly, not denying it, not rejecting it, but simply seeing it. Seeing how it formed, seeing how it repeats, seeing how it shapes your reactions, and then asking softly, is this the only way my life can be understood? That question does not erase the past, but it opens possibility. It allows new interpretations to enter, new meanings, new ways of seeing the same moments. A failure becomes experience, a loss becomes transformation, a silence becomes space. And slowly, the story begins to shift. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently, like a sentence being rewritten word by word. And as the story changes, so does your experience. Because you begin to act differently, you notice different things, you respond differently, you move through life with a new sense of openness, and life responds in its own way, not perfectly, not predictably, but differently enough to create a new pattern. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Your life is not only what happens to you, it is also the story you tell about what happens. And that story is not permanent. You are not trapped inside it. You are the one telling it, even if you have forgotten. So tonight, gently notice this. What is the story you have been repeating about yourself, about your past, about your future? Do not judge it. Do not try to change it immediately. Just see it. And in that seeing, something quiet begins. A distance between you and the story. A space where new meaning can emerge. And in that space, your life is no longer limited to one version. It becomes something softer, something open, something still being written. And maybe, for the first time, you realize something simple. The story was never meant to trap you. It was meant to be seen. And once it is seen, you are free to let it change. The silence that exists behind every thought. There is something present right now, so close, so constant, that it almost disappears. Not because it is hidden, but because it is always there. Beneath every thought, behind every word, between every moment, there is silence. Not the kind of silence you hear in a quiet room, not the absence of sound, but a deeper silence, a stillness that exists, even while the mind is moving. And here is the paradox. Silence is always present, yet it is almost never noticed, because attention is drawn to what moves, to thoughts, to noise, to meaning. And silence does not move. It does not demand attention. It does not try to be seen. It simply remains. Think about this gently. Right now, thoughts are appearing in your mind, some clear, some faint, some meaningful, some passing quickly. And between each thought, there is a small gap, a space, so small you rarely notice it, but it is there. And in that space, there is nothing, no word, no image, no interpretation, just quiet. So ask yourself slowly, if thoughts come and go, then what remains when there are no thoughts? The answer is not emptiness in the way the mind imagines it. It is presence, a silent awareness that does not need to speak. But here is where the mind becomes restless, because it is not used to silence, it is used to movement, it is used to filling every space. If there is quiet, it creates a thought. If there is stillness, it searches for meaning, because silence feels unfamiliar, and the unfamiliar feels uncertain. So the mind keeps talking, not always out of need, but out of habit. But notice this: even while thoughts are moving, silence is still there. It does not disappear when thoughts appear. It simply becomes unnoticed, like the sky behind clouds. The clouds move, the sky remains, thoughts move, silence remains. And the moment you notice this, something subtle shifts. You are no longer only inside the thoughts. You are aware of the space around them, and that space changes everything. A thought appears. Normally, it takes your attention completely, but now you also sense the silence behind it. The thought feels lighter, less solid, less overwhelming, not because it changed, but because it is no longer everything. There is something deeper holding it. This is the beginning of a different kind of awareness, not focused on content, but aware of the background. And in that awareness, the mind begins to slow, not by force, not by effort, but naturally. Because silence does not resist thoughts, it allows them, and in allowing, it does not get disturbed. So again, gently ask yourself, if silence is always present, then why does the mind feel so noisy? The answer is simple. Because attention is fixed on movement. You hear the thoughts, you follow them, you build on them, and so the silence is forgotten. But the moment attention softens, silence becomes noticeable, not created, not achieved, just noticed. Like stepping back from a busy street and suddenly hearing the space between the sounds, and in that space, there is calm. Not because everything stopped, but because you are no longer fully inside the noise. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Silence is not something you find, it is something you stop overlooking. It is always there, before a thought appears, during the thought, and after it fades. And when you begin to notice it, even briefly, something inside you relaxes. Because silence does not demand anything. It does not judge. It does not push or pull. It simply holds everything without resistance. And being aware of that feels like rest. So tonight, gently notice this. Do not try to stop your thoughts. Do not try to force silence. Just listen. Not to the words, but to what exists around them. The quiet space, the pause between thoughts, the stillness beneath movement. And as you notice it again and again, it becomes clearer. Not louder, just more present in your awareness. And slowly, very quietly, you begin to understand something simple. Silence was never far away. It was always here, waiting, not to be created, but to be noticed. And in that noticing, you begin to rest in something deeper than thought. The self that watches the self. There is something strange that happens when you turn your attention inward. At first, it feels simple. You notice your thoughts, you notice your emotions, you notice your reactions, and it feels like you are observing yourself. But if you stay with it, something deeper begins to unfold, because here is the paradox. If you are the one being observed, then who is the one observing? And if you are the one observing, then what is the you being observed? It seems like there are two of you, one that thinks and one that notices thinking, one that feels and one that notices the feeling, one that reacts and one that quietly watches the reaction. But both feel like you. So which one is real? This is where the mind begins to slow, because it cannot easily separate the two. You say, "I am anxious," but then you notice the anxiety. So are you the anxiety or the one noticing it? You say, "I am thinking too much," but then you observe the thinking. So are you the thoughts or the one aware of them? Each time you look, the answer shifts, and the deeper you look, the less solid the idea of a single self becomes. Imagine sitting quietly, watching your thoughts pass by. A thought appears, "I need to figure this out," and immediately something else notices it. That is a thought. Now there are two layers, the thought and the awareness of the thought. But then something else happens. You notice that awareness. You realize, "I am aware that I am aware." And now there is another layer. So again, gently ask yourself, how many selves are there if you can keep observing each one? The answer is not what the mind expects. There are not many selves. There is only awareness observing different layers of experience, but the mind divides it to make sense of it. It creates a thinker, a feeler, an observer, and calls all of them me. But in reality, they are movements within awareness, not separate identities. This is why the sense of self feels both stable and uncertain. Stable because awareness is always present. Uncertain because what you identify as yourself keeps changing. One moment you feel like your thoughts, another moment you feel like your emotions, and sometimes you feel like the quiet observer behind it all. So which one are you? This is the heart of the paradox. You are not the shifting parts, you are the space in which they appear. But because the shifting parts are louder, you often forget the space. A thought says, "This is who I am." An emotion says, "This is what I feel." And you follow them, you become them, until something interrupts the pattern. A moment of awareness, a pause, a simple noticing. And suddenly, you are no longer lost inside the experience. You are watching it. And in that moment, the sense of self changes. Not because you became something new, but because you stepped back into something that was always there. This is why self-observation can feel unsettling, because it removes the certainty of a fixed identity. If you are not your thoughts, and not your emotions, and not even the roles you play, then what are you? The mind searches for an answer, but the answer is not another concept. It is something you experience when you stop searching. It is the simple awareness that is present right now, the quiet sense of being, not defined, not labeled, just aware. And this awareness does not need to become anything. It does not need to prove itself. It does not need to hold on to an identity. It simply observes, and in observing, it remains untouched. A thought comes, it sees it. A feeling rises, it allows it. An identity appears, it watches it form and fade. Nothing sticks, nothing defines it. And in that, there is a kind of freedom, not loud, not dramatic, but steady. Because you are no longer limited to being one version of yourself. You are the one who can see all versions. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice the thoughts moving. Notice the emotions shifting. Notice the small voice that says, "This is me." And then notice the one who is aware of all of it. Do not try to define it. Do not try to capture it. Just rest as it. Because the moment you try to turn awareness into something, it becomes another object, another self to observe. And the paradox continues. But when you stop trying to define it, it remains simple, clear, present, and in that simplicity, something becomes obvious. You were never just the thoughts, you were never just the feelings, you were never just the identity. You were always the one watching. And once you begin to see from that place, the idea of a fixed self begins to loosen, not disappear completely, but soften. And in that softness, you are no longer trapped inside yourself. You are aware of yourself, and that awareness is where the deepest freedom begins. The reality that depends on attention. There is something you carry with you everywhere you go. You use it constantly. You rely on it without thinking. And yet, you rarely question it. Your attention. It moves quietly, from one thought to another, from one detail to the next. And wherever it goes, your reality seems to follow. This is the paradox. What you pay attention to begins to feel like all that exists. Not because it is everything, but because it is everything you are noticing. Imagine standing in a crowded place, voices everywhere, movements in every direction, countless small details unfolding at once. But you focus on one voice, and suddenly that voice becomes clear. Everything else fades into the background. The noise is still there, the people are still moving, but your experience narrows. It becomes centered around what you chose to notice. So ask yourself slowly, if everything exists at once, then why does your reality feel so specific? The answer is simple and powerful, because attention selects. It filters, it highlights certain parts of experience and dims the rest. And over time, what you repeatedly focus on begins to feel like the whole picture. A person who focuses on what is missing begins to feel lack. A person who focuses on what could go wrong begins to feel anxiety. A person who focuses on what is working begins to feel stability. The world does not change, but the experience of the world changes completely. This is how attention shapes reality, not by creating things out of nothing, but by deciding what becomes visible and what remains unnoticed. Think about a time when you were deeply focused on something, a task, a thought, a memory. Everything else seemed distant, almost invisible, not because it disappeared, but because your attention was elsewhere. And the moment your attention shifted, your experience shifted with it. So again, gently ask yourself, if your reality depends on where your attention goes, then how much of your life have you experienced simply because you kept looking at the same things? The answer is not meant to limit you, it is meant to reveal possibility. Because attention is not fixed, it moves, and you can begin to notice how it moves without forcing it, without controlling it completely, just by becoming aware of it. Imagine noticing your attention as it shifts from thought to thought, from worry to memory, from sound to sensation, and instead of following it unconsciously, you begin to see it. This is where my attention is going. And in that moment, something changes. You are no longer lost in what you are noticing. You are aware of the act of noticing itself. And that awareness creates space. A thought may try to pull your attention, but now you can see it. A worry may try to hold your focus, but now you can choose. Not perfectly, not all the time, but enough to feel a shift. This is where the paradox begins to soften. Reality may depend on attention, but attention itself can be seen. And once it is seen, it becomes more flexible, more open, less automatic. You are no longer completely pulled into whatever appears. You begin to move with intention, gently, quietly. You notice a negative thought, and instead of feeding it, your attention softens. It does not cling, it does not build, and the thought fades, not because it was removed, but because it was not sustained. You notice a simple moment, a breath, a quiet space, and your attention rests there, and suddenly something changes. The moment feels fuller, calmer, more real, not because it became important, but because you allowed yourself to be with it. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. Your reality is not only what exists, it is what you give your attention to. And when attention becomes conscious, reality becomes more open, less fixed, less overwhelming, more fluid, because you are no longer trapped in one narrow stream of experience. You are aware of the wider field. So tonight, gently notice this. Where is your attention right now? Is it in the past? Is it in the future? Is it in a thought, repeating quietly? Do not try to force it somewhere else. Just see it. And in that seeing, something begins to loosen. The pull becomes softer. The movement becomes clearer. And slowly, you begin to guide your attention, not with effort, but with awareness. And in that gentle shift, your experience changes, not dramatically, not suddenly, but quietly, like light moving across a surface, revealing something new, something that was always there, but simply unnoticed. And in that noticing, your reality begins to expand, not because more exists, but because you are finally seeing more of what already does. The letting go that gives you everything. There is something the mind holds on to without even realizing it. It holds on to outcomes. It holds on to control. It holds on to people, identities, expectations, and moments. And beneath all of this, there is a quiet belief: if I let go, I will lose something. So you hold tighter to what you want, to what you fear losing, to what feels important. And for a moment, it feels like strength, like you are protecting what matters. But slowly, something changes. The tighter you hold, the heavier everything becomes. The more you try to keep something, the more fragile it feels. The more you resist change, the more uncomfortable it becomes. And here is the paradox. The more you hold on, the less you actually have. And the moment you let go, something opens, not loss, but space. Think about this gently. Have you ever tried to force yourself to be calm? You hold on to the idea of calmness. You try to maintain it. But the more you try, the more tension appears, because calm cannot be held. It can only be allowed. Have you ever tried to hold on to a moment, a peaceful feeling, a meaningful experience? You want it to stay. But the moment you try to keep it, you introduce fear, fear of losing it, and suddenly the moment is no longer peaceful, because you are no longer inside it. You are trying to preserve it. So ask yourself slowly, what happens when you stop trying to hold everything together? The answer is quieter than the mind expects. Things begin to move naturally, not perfectly, not always comfortably, but without resistance. And in that movement, there is a different kind of stability, not the stability of control, but the stability of acceptance. Letting go does not mean losing everything. It means releasing the need to control everything. It means allowing life to unfold without gripping every outcome. But the mind resists this because it associates letting go with giving up, with not caring, with becoming passive. But this is not true. Letting go is not about doing nothing. It is about not forcing everything. It is about acting without attachment, caring without fear, moving without clinging. This is where the paradox reveals itself. When you let go of needing a specific outcome, you become more present, more open, more able to respond clearly. And in that clarity, you often move more effectively. A person who is not attached to being perfect acts more freely. A person who is not afraid of losing takes more meaningful risks. A person who is not holding tightly is more able to receive. So again, gently ask yourself, what are you holding on to that is quietly creating tension inside you? The answer may come softly, a belief, an expectation, a fear, something you feel you cannot release. But imagine this for a moment. What if, just for now, you softened your grip? Not completely, just slightly, enough to feel the difference. And in that slight release, something unexpected happens. The tension reduces, the pressure fades, and suddenly you feel lighter. Not because you gained something new, but because you stopped carrying something unnecessary. This is the deeper layer of the paradox. Letting go does not take things away from you. It removes what was blocking your experience of them. When you let go of needing control, you experience freedom. When you let go of fear of loss, you experience presence. When you let go of fixed expectations, you experience life more fully. And in that fullness, it feels like you gained everything. Not in a material sense, but in a deeper, quieter way, because you are no longer divided, no longer resisting, no longer holding back your experience. You are simply here, and being here without resistance feels complete. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice where you are holding tightly. Notice where you are trying to control outcomes. Notice where fear is keeping your grip closed. And without forcing anything, just soften. Let the moment be as it is. Let thoughts come and go. Let feelings rise and fall. Let life move without needing to stop it. And in that allowing, something opens, not outside you, but within you. A quiet space, a sense of ease, a feeling of enoughness, and slowly, very quietly, you begin to understand something simple. You were never meant to hold everything. You were meant to experience it, and the moment you let go, you do not lose the world. You finally feel it. The end that was never there. There is something the mind is always searching for, an ending, a point where everything settles, a moment where nothing more needs to be done, a place where questions stop and clarity stays. It appears in different forms. When this problem is solved, I will feel at peace. When I reach that goal, everything will be complete. When this phase ends, life will finally make sense. And for a while, it feels real, close, almost reachable. But here is the paradox. The end you are waiting for never truly arrives. Not because life is incomplete, but because the idea of a final end is created by the mind. Think about this gently. Have you ever reached something you once believed would change everything? A goal, a moment, a resolution, and for a brief time it felt satisfying. But then something returned. Another thought, another desire, another question, and the sense of not yet appeared again. So ask yourself slowly, if every ending leads to another beginning, then where is the final end you are waiting for? The answer is quiet and unsettling at first. There isn't one, because life is not moving toward a permanent conclusion. It is moving constantly, flowing from one moment to the next. But the mind prefers completion. It prefers closure, because closure feels like control. It feels like something can be held, finished, understood. So it creates the idea of an end, a point where everything will make sense, a moment where uncertainty disappears. But that moment is always imagined, always somewhere ahead, always just out of reach, and chasing it keeps you moving away from what is here. This is where the paradox deepens. The search for an ending prevents you from fully experiencing what has no end. Life is not a problem to be solved. It is a process to be experienced. But when the mind is focused on finishing it, it misses the unfolding. Imagine reading a book, but only caring about the final page. You rush through the chapters, you skip details, you move quickly, and when you reach the end, the experience feels incomplete. Not because the book was lacking, but because you were not present for it. In the same way, when you are always moving toward an end, you miss the depth of the present moment. But here is where something shifts. What if there is no final end? What if there is no moment where everything becomes permanently resolved? What if life is not meant to arrive, but to continue? At first, this can feel uncomfortable, because it removes the idea of final certainty. But look deeper, it also removes the pressure to reach it. If there is no final end to chase, then there is nowhere you must arrive, nothing you must complete in order to finally feel at peace. And in that realization, something softens. The constant forward movement slows, the need to get there weakens, and you begin to feel something different, not completion, but presence. Because when you stop chasing the end, you return to the moment, not as a step toward something else, but as something complete in itself. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. The end was never there, because it was never needed. What you were searching for at the end was something that only exists now. Clarity, peace, stillness, not as permanent states, but as experiences available in the present. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice where your mind is moving toward an ending, a resolution, a future moment, a sense of completion, and instead of following it, pause, return, not to find an answer, but to feel what is already here, the breath, the stillness, the quiet awareness, because this moment does not need to lead anywhere. It does not need to become something else. It is already complete in its own way, not perfect, not final, but whole as it is. And when you begin to see this, the search for an ending begins to fade, not completely, but enough to feel a difference, a lightness, a sense that you are no longer chasing something distant. You are here, in a moment that is always changing, but never lacking. And slowly, very quietly, you begin to understand something simple. Life was never moving toward an end. It was always unfolding, and you were never meant to finish it. You were meant to experience it as it moves. The truth that cannot be told. There is something you have always been searching for, a truth. Not just information, not just answers, but something deeper, something final, something that explains everything clearly, and you look for it in words, in ideas, in explanations, in meanings that can be understood and held. But here is the paradox. The deepest truth cannot be told, not because it is hidden, but because anything that can be said is already too small. Think about this gently. Every time you try to explain something, you use words, and words are limited. They point, they describe, they suggest, but they are not the thing itself. The word water is not water. The word peace is not peace. The word you is not you. They are symbols, and symbols can never fully contain what they represent. So ask yourself slowly, if truth must be expressed through words, but words are limited, then can truth ever be fully spoken? The answer is quiet, no. Because the moment truth is turned into language, it becomes an interpretation, a version, a perspective, not the complete reality itself. This is why the same truth can be described in many different ways, and each description feels slightly different, because each one is shaped by the one speaking, by their experience, their understanding, their way of seeing, but the truth itself remains beyond the description. Imagine trying to describe silence. You can talk about it. You can say, it is calm, it is still, it is empty. But none of these words are silence. They only point toward it. And the moment you hear them, your mind creates an image, an idea, something to hold. But the actual experience of silence is different. It is direct, immediate, beyond words. This is how truth exists, not as something you fully explain, but as something you experience. But the mind prefers words, because words feel clear, they feel structured. They feel like something you can understand, so it keeps searching, it keeps asking, what is the truth? What is the final answer? What explains everything? And every answer it finds feels incomplete, because it is not wrong, but limited. And this creates a strange feeling, a sense that something is known, but cannot be fully expressed. You feel it in quiet moments, a clarity that does not need explanation, a stillness that does not need meaning, a sense of understanding without words. And yet, the moment you try to explain it, it fades. So again, gently ask yourself, why does truth feel clearer in silence than in explanation? The answer is subtle, because truth is not something you think. It is something you see directly, without the filter of language, without the need to define it. The moment you name it, you step slightly away from it, you turn it into an idea, and ideas are not the same as experience. This does not mean words are useless. They are helpful, they guide, they point, they open the door, but they are not the destination. They are the sign, not the place. This is the deeper layer of the paradox. Truth cannot be told, but it can be known, not through explanation, but through awareness, through direct experience, through seeing without needing to describe. Imagine sitting quietly without trying to understand anything, no questions, no conclusions, no effort to define, just being. And in that space, something becomes clear, not in words, not in concepts, but in a simple sense of presence, a knowing that does not need explanation, a clarity that does not need proof. And in that moment, you realize something. You were never far from truth. You were only trying to translate it into something smaller, something the mind could hold. But truth does not need to be held, it only needs to be seen. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice the urge to explain everything, to define, to conclude, and instead, pause. Allow the moment to be as it is, without turning it into words. Feel it, experience it, let it exist without labeling it. And in that quiet, something deeper begins to appear. Not as an answer, but as a presence, a simple awareness that does not need to speak. And slowly, very quietly, you begin to understand something profound. The truth you were searching for was never meant to be said. It was meant to be realized, not through language, but through seeing. And once you see it, even for a moment, you no longer need to explain it, because you already know. The mind that creates its own cage. There is a place you have been inside for a very long time. It has no walls you can touch, no doors you can see, and yet it can feel incredibly real. It feels like limitation, like pressure, like being stuck in something you cannot fully escape. And here is the paradox. The cage you feel trapped in is often created by the very mind trying to escape it. Not intentionally, not knowingly, but quietly, through patterns that repeat. Think about this gently. A thought appears. I can't do this. It feels small at first, just a passing idea, but then it returns, again and again, and slowly it becomes something more. It becomes a belief, and that belief begins to shape your actions. You hesitate, you avoid, you step back, and each time you do, the belief strengthens. See, I really can't do this. But pause for a moment. Was it ever true? Or did the thought create the behavior that made it feel true? This is how the cage forms, not from reality itself, but from repeated patterns of thinking. A thought becomes a belief becomes a behavior becomes an experience, and that experience reinforces the original thought, and the loop continues. Thought, belief, action, experience, thought, and each time it repeats, the cage feels more solid, more real, more impossible to leave. But look closely. Where are the walls? Can you touch them? Can you point to them outside your mind? Or do they exist only in the way you think and the way you react? This is where the paradox begins to reveal itself. The cage is not built from reality. It is built from interpretation, from assumptions, from fears, from repeated ideas that were never questioned. I am not capable. I always fail. This is just how I am. These feel like truths, but they began as thoughts, and thoughts are not permanent. Yet when they are repeated enough, they feel like structure, like something solid, something unchangeable. But here is the quiet truth. The cage is not locked. It only feels that way because you believe the thoughts that built it. So ask yourself slowly, if the mind can create the cage, can it also step outside of it? The answer is not in forcing change. It is not in fighting the thoughts, because fighting them keeps you inside the same pattern. The answer is in seeing the cage for what it is, not a fixed reality, but a pattern of thinking. Imagine noticing a limiting thought as it appears. I can't do this. And instead of believing it immediately, you pause, you see it, you recognize it. This is a thought, not a fact, not a conclusion, just a thought. And in that moment, something shifts. The thought is still there, but it is no longer invisible. It is no longer controlling everything automatically. You are seeing it instead of being inside it. And that changes everything, because the cage depends on unconscious repetition. When the pattern is unseen, it continues. But when it is seen, it begins to weaken, not instantly, not completely, but enough to create space. And in that space, you can respond differently. A thought says, you can't, but awareness sees it and does not immediately follow. And slowly, a new possibility appears. Not certainty, not confidence, just openness. And openness is the beginning of freedom, because freedom does not come from removing every limitation. It comes from no longer being completely defined by them. You may still feel fear, you may still hear the same thoughts, but you are not fully inside them anymore. You are aware of them, and awareness is not trapped. So tonight, gently notice this. Notice the thoughts that repeat, the ones that feel like boundaries, the ones that define what you believe you can or cannot do. And instead of accepting them immediately, just observe. See how they appear, see how they repeat, see how they shape your reactions, and quietly remind yourself, this is not a wall, this is a thought. And in that simple recognition, something begins to loosen. The cage does not disappear all at once, but it becomes less solid, less convincing, less absolute. And slowly, very quietly, you begin to step outside it, not by breaking it, but by no longer believing it completely. And in that space, you realize something simple. You were never fully trapped. You were only moving within a pattern that felt like a prison. And now, you are beginning to see beyond it. The awareness that was always free. There is something you have been carrying through every moment of your life, through every thought, through every fear, through every change you have ever experienced. It has never left you, and yet you have rarely noticed it. Not because it was hidden, but because it was always there. This is the paradox. You have been searching for freedom, while the part of you that is truly free has never been trapped. Think about this gently. All your life, you have moved through different states, moments of happiness, moments of confusion, moments of fear, moments of clarity, and in each of those moments, something was present, something that noticed the experience. When you were anxious, it was aware of the anxiety. When you were calm, it was aware of the calm. When you were lost in thought, it was still there, quietly knowing. So ask yourself slowly, has this awareness ever been trapped, or has it only been aware of the feeling of being trapped? The answer is subtle but powerful. Awareness itself has never been confined. It has only witnessed states that felt like confinement. A thought may say, "I am stuck." An emotion may feel heavy. A situation may feel limiting. But awareness is simply aware of all of it. It does not become trapped. It does not shrink. It does not lose itself. It remains. This is what makes the paradox so quiet and so easy to miss. Because when you feel trapped, you believe the experience. You identify with it. I am stuck. I am lost. I cannot move forward. But look closer. There is something noticing those thoughts, something aware of that feeling, and that something is not stuck. It is seeing the idea of being stuck. This does not mean your experiences are not real. The feelings are real. The situations are real. But the one aware of them is not limited in the same way. Imagine sitting in a room with closed walls. You may feel confined. You may feel restricted. But your awareness of the room is not confined by the walls. It sees the walls. It does not become them. In the same way, your awareness sees your thoughts, your emotions, your identity. But it does not become limited by them, and yet you often forget this. You become the thought, you become the feeling, you become the identity, and in that identification, the sense of being trapped appears. So again, gently ask yourself, if awareness is always present and always observing, then can it ever truly be imprisoned? The answer is quiet. No, because awareness is not inside the experience. The experience is inside awareness. Thoughts appear in it. Feelings move through it. Moments rise and fall within it. But awareness itself remains open, untouched, free, not as an idea, not as something to believe, but as something you can notice right now. Pause for a moment, notice a thought, then notice that you are aware of it. Notice a feeling, then notice that you are aware of that too. That awareness is not struggling. It is not resisting. It is simply present, and in that presence there is no restriction, no boundary, no limitation, just openness. This is the answer hidden inside the paradox. You were never meant to become free because the deepest part of you was never trapped. What you experience may change, what you feel may shift, what you think may come and go, but awareness remains, and in recognizing it, even briefly, something changes, not outside you, but in how you experience everything. The need to escape softens, the tension reduces, the search begins to slow, because you realize what you were looking for was never somewhere else. It was always here, quiet, unnoticed, constant. So tonight, gently rest in this, not as a concept, not as something to understand, but as something to feel. The simple awareness of being here, before the thoughts, before the meanings, before the stories, just awareness. And in that awareness, there is nothing to fix, nothing to become, nothing to escape, because you are already what you were searching for. And slowly, very quietly, you begin to understand something simple, yet profound. Freedom was never something you had to reach. It was something you had to notice, and it was always here. Conclusion. And now, as everything gently settles, notice how each paradox was not something outside you, but something you were already experiencing. The thoughts that feel real, the memories that reshape themselves, the emotions that pretend to be truth, the fears, the loops, the identities, the stories, all of them moving, all of them changing, and beneath all of it, something still, something quiet, something aware. This journey was never about finding new answers. It was about seeing what was already here in a different way. And now, you may begin to notice something subtle, a little more space in your thoughts, a little less weight in your emotions, a little more distance from the patterns that once felt absolute, not because they disappeared, but because you are no longer completely inside them. You are aware of them, and that awareness changes everything. So as you slowly drift toward rest, let go of trying to hold these ideas. Let them fade gently. Let them become part of the quiet background of your mind. Because what matters is not remembering every word. It is the shift that has already begun. And if, in this quiet moment, you feel even a small sense of calm, even a slight change in how you see things, then this journey has done its work. And if you would like to continue exploring these deeper layers of the mind in this same calm, slow and thought-provoking way, you can gently support this space by subscribing and liking the video. Only if it feels right. No pressure, just an invitation to continue this journey together. Now, let everything soften. Let the thoughts slow down. Let the silence expand, and simply rest in the awareness that was always here.